Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the first in a series of Startup Know-How panel discussions offered by Isles Venture Development in collaboration with the UMass Amherst Technology Transfer Office and the Accelerating Research Translation Program. Today we will be discussing how to create a UMass startup. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Julian Latde-Gonzalez, the Associate Director of Venture Development here at the Institute for Applied Life Sciences. Next, just a few housekeeping items. This seminar is being recorded, so if you miss any part of the panel discussion or you'd like to forward it to someone who could not attend, there will be a replay of this and all future seminars available on our website and on YouTube. I recommend you set your view mode to speaker. Please stay muted during the conversation. We will also save Q&A until the end of the presentation. So during that time, I welcome you to use the raised hand feature. And once called upon, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Also, feel free to put your questions in the chat throughout the panel discussion, and we'll do our best to answer all of them. I'd like to introduce you to our moderator, Karen Utgoff. She is the Director of Venture Development at the UMass, Director of Venture Development here at the Institute for Applied Life Sciences. All right, Karen, take it away.
Thank you, Julian. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you all today, and I'm really excited to share this fantastic panel with you. We did a similar program a few years ago, and this update is really timely and exciting. So just a little bit about our objective today. We're really aiming to demystify campus organizations and policies for UMass researchers aiming to establish new for-profit or not-for-profit ventures based on research, scholarly and creative works. What's the exciting work that's coming from the campus. And I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves briefly, and then we will share the agenda for today. So Heather, can I ask you to unmute and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Karen. My name is Heather Hermann. I'm the Director of Research Risk Management in the Office for Research Compliance.
And Burnley?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Burnley Jaklevic. I'm the Director of the Technology Transfer Office here on campus.
Hilary.
Hello, I'm Hilary Reid, and I am the Financial Conflict of Interest Compliance Analyst in the Office of Research Compliance.
And Sloan, last but certainly not least.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sloan Siegrist. I'm Associate Professor in Microbiology, and I'm a co-founder of Latde Diagnostics.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Just a brief word about the order we're going to go in. Sloan is going to talk first because she is, as she says, the founder of Latde Diagnostics, and we really wanted you to hear from a founder, a faculty founder today. Then we'll have Burnley talk a little bit about her office and about intellectual property, and then Hilary, and then Heather. And then I will have some questions for our panel. All of that will be recorded. And then when we switch over to Q&A from you all, we will stop the recording so we can have a more relaxed discussion. So Sloan, can I ask you to tell us about how you went from the Siegrist group to Latde Diagnostics with your technology?
Sure. Thanks, by the way, for the opportunity here. So my lab studies tuberculosis, and one of the reagents that we use to label the bacteria, it occurred to us a long time ago that we might be able to develop it more broadly into a diagnostic that could be commercialized. And I think that idea would have stayed just an idea if it hadn't been for two things. So the first thing was the availability of seed funding from Manning Isles. And the second thing is the person in the middle of this slide, Emily Melzer, who was a graduate student in the lab. And so we took a little bit of preliminary data and applied for the seed funding. We didn't get it the first time, but we got it the second time. And then Emily graduated and became a co-founder and CEO of Latde. So that's how that started.
Okay. and just bring us up to date a little bit on where Latde is now.
Yeah, we've been going for a few years now, with different kind of pockets of money, both dilutive and non-dilutive funding. Most recently, we got an SBIR phase 1. And so Emily, as I said, is our CEO, and she runs us from San Diego, and she does it very well. And we have 2 scientists who are working in the collaboratory space, a few floors up from where my lab is. So it's actually very convenient.
And then I'll ask you one other question, and then we'll move on to Burnley. This is my segue. Tell us about your intellectual property.
Oh, right. So we did have a patent from my postdoc work when we came. So that's from UC Berkeley. And then we have filed a provisional, and actually we're about to file the patent application from work that was done at UMass. And so I had heard maybe from Burnley herself or from someone that I should reach out early. So I did. And she very kindly asked if she could come over and chat. So I didn't even have to go to her. It was great. So I just remember showing her kind of like my idea. We were sitting in my lab, and she gave me a little bit of advice and said, I think you're almost there. Maybe do these few other things. And so we did those few other things, and then we got back in contact when we were ready to file for a provisional. It was very easy. Thank you, Burnley.
Okay, thanks, Sloan. All right, I'm going to advance the slides and turn it over to Burnley.
Okay, hi everyone again. So I'm the director of the Technology Transfer Office, and we're the unit here on campus that's designated to evaluate, protect, manage, and market inventions and other types of IP that are made in the UMass Amherst research programs. So what that means is we have a budget that we can use to file patent applications, and we also have relationships with lots of different attorneys with different technical backgrounds. So when someone comes to us with an invention and we decide to file a patent application, we can match the inventors with the attorney with the appropriate background, which is what we tried to do in Sloan's case. We found someone with a life science background to file that patent application. We're also authorized to license UMass-owned IP to established companies, including startup companies. So we can handle all types of IP. The only type of IP that we don't handle are trademarks. That's handled by another office. Next slide, please. So our goals, we're really here to support researchers on all aspects of IP. We're happy to come meet with you in your lab, talk to you about your ideas and your IP, and learn about your research and how we can best support you. We solicit, evaluate, protect, and license novel technologies with commercial value. And we rely on inventors and researchers to tell us about those ideas. There's a lot of research that goes on across campus, and we don't know about everything. So we rely on you to reach out to us and tell us about your inventions. We try to facilitate commercialization of new products and services based on those inventions, which will hopefully benefit society. We promote entrepreneurship and assist startups with IP considerations and also licensing. And then we try and complement and support existing university efforts to both engage industry and support entrepreneurship. And one example of an existing effort on campus is ISLE's Venture Development. We work really closely with ISLE's Venture Development to support startups. And then ultimately, we're trying to promote economic development, both locally and nationally, through these commercial efforts, or trying to commercialize these technologies. Next slide, please. So how does a startup benefit from IP? There are lots of reasons, but one is the IP can protect the technology for your startup, protect the product that you're trying to sell. We also try and draft claims in patent applications, and claims are kind of the important part of the patent application that go beyond the products you plan or the services you plan on selling, and can provide a little bit of a buffer and block or prevent others, your competitors, from selling similar products. IP is also important because investors, which you're probably going to need, care about it, and they'll want to see that you have an IP estate or an IP position. And it's very important for things like pharmaceutical drugs that cost a lot of money to develop. Market exclusivity really justifies those big investments that are needed to get a pharmaceutical drug to patients. And then finally, you can make money by licensing IP to third parties. Your startup can. So next slide, please. So Karen tells me that she gets this question a lot. People are not quite sure what we do. And so I thought I'd kind of outline a few scenarios of when you should probably contact us or when we'd like to hear from you. Definitely when you have an idea or an invention, please reach out and let us know. And even if you're not sure if you have an invention, we're happy to chat. It's never really too early to start talking about IP. Ideally, we'd like you to submit an invention disclosure with all the details of your invention, because then we can take a deep dive and look at patentability and how it was funded and whether we have any obligations. And we also use your invention disclosure and any materials that you give us. We also give those to the patent attorney if we decide to file an invention or a patent application on the invention. So those invention disclosures are really important. If you have a question about IP ownership, we're happy to try and address that. And we're guided by the university's intellectual property policy there. And then if you're contemplating a collaboration, or you're sending or receiving materials to a third party, or you're planning on sharing your confidential information, we can also help there. We can negotiate and sign collaboration agreements and MTAs and confidentiality agreements on your behalf. But I would just like to say that if you're just having an initial conversation with a company to see if there's kind of some mutual interest there, you probably don't need a confidentiality agreement at that really early stage. But if you're having a second or a third discussion with that company and you're planning on sharing your confidential information, then that's when we can put a CDA in place. And then finally, research sponsors want to know when you've made an invention. And so we work with different sponsors, both federal agencies and industry sponsors, to report your inventions. Next slide. And so who we are, we're a 5-person office. If you submit an invention disclosure, you're probably going to work with either Helen, Nikki, or I. We have different technical backgrounds. Helen works with innovators in engineering and computer science. Nikki has a chemistry background and works with chemistry researchers and also food science and polymer science. And then I have a background in molecular biology, so I work with life science innovators. Lynn LaLiberte handles our operations and patent administration. And Marian Lakaitis negotiates those material transfer agreements and confidentiality agreements. And she also works with federal agencies to report inventions. And so I just want to say that, reach out to us anytime if you have a question about IP. We also have office hours once a month, but we're happy to meet with you anytime. You can also reach us at tto@umass.edu. Thanks.
Thanks, Burnley. I know that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of investigators knowing about public disclosures and all sorts of other things, but I think the most important thing is for them to know that you are here to answer those questions. Next, we're going to, I'm going to ask Hilary Reid to speak about research compliance. Hilary, I'm happy to advance the slides for you.
Thank you, Karen. So I'm here to talk about how the Office of Research Compliance supports startups. One of the first things we do is help get outside activities approval for your startup. This approval comes from your department chair but the process is administered by ORC through your Kowali COI disclosure. The next thing we do is the conflict of interest analysis for your startup. Please feel free to contact us in advance with any questions about the process. Disclose your startup in Kowali COI no later than incorporation. We will look at university policies and federal agency regulations and walk you through the entire process if a management plan is necessary. We do have a newly implemented procedure for interim decisions that puts management plans in place faster than in the past. Next slide, please. Why do conflicts need management? The management process ensures that the primary obligation of full-time employees to their university duties is fulfilled. The management process protects you, the university, and research sponsors. It protects research integrity and reputation, intellectual property, research security, and provides a basis to respond to questions or allegations from third parties. Next slide, please. What are some startup situations that commonly need management? If you have an equity interest in a privately held company that is related to your university research, and this is the case for almost every faculty startup. If students or staff are involved in the faculty member startup. If there's university IP licensing or other contracts anticipated between the startup and UMass Amherst. Or if the startup wants to use non-public university resources. Next slide, please. When you have federally funded research awards, there are some special considerations if your startup is related to ongoing PHS or other federally funded research. You must disclose the startup in Kowali COI at proposal or within 30 days if the startup is formed after the PHS award is already in progress. PHS funds cannot be expended until any conflicts are managed and reported to the agency. PHS has very strict timelines for disclosure, management, and reporting of the managed conflict. If these timelines aren't met, PHS may require a retrospective research review to ensure the financial interest did not negatively affect the integrity of the research. This is an outcome we all want to avoid. Other federal agencies have similar requirements, so please disclose your startup timely, keep your COI disclosure up to date if any changes occur, and we will help you navigate the rest. Next slide, please.
So I think now we're going to turn it over to Heather.
Yes.
Thank you, Karen. I'm just going to go through some of those take-home messages from Hilary's part of the presentation. We're asking everyone to reach out to us as soon as you begin making plans for your startup. Hilary and I are both available. We can have meetings kind of one-on-one to hear your plans and help put a few recommendations in place early on. Please use the Kowali COI disclosure for your startup no later than at the time of incorporation. We will review your disclosure for relatedness to any current research you may have going on and any potential financial conflicts of interest. For outside activity approval, we must have that in place before we are able to manage an FCOI for you. And that, again, that outside activity approval comes from your department head. However, we do administer the process of getting the information to your department head through that COI disclosure form in Kowali. And if it is necessary, Hilary, or mostly Hilary, will draft a management plan for the COI committee to review. And with the new process that we have, we can seek interim approvals because the COI committee only meets once a month. So we want to get those as quickly as we can so that you can begin your work. Next slide, please. Thanks, Karen. And I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce the topic about research security. And when you disclose your COIs using the Koali disclosure form, there's also a section on that form that includes foreign affiliations. And we are asking you to provide information about any employment you may have with foreign entities or governments, any other positions or appointments with foreign entities or governments, which may be things like titled academic, professional, or institutional appointments. And it's whether or not remuneration is received. And it doesn't matter if it's full-time, part-time, or voluntary. We ask for information about consulting arrangements that you may have with foreign entities or government, and any receipt of other research support. And other research support may be things like a gift, financial support for lab personnel, high value research materials like biologics or chemical technology, that kind of thing. Any in-kind contributions, including things like lab space, whether or not you may be participating in a foreign government-sponsored talent recruitment program, and then anything that might be pending in terms of applications that you have for sponsored research by foreign governments. And this is a result of some of the requirements in the CHIPS and Science Act, but I wanted to bring it to your attention because when we review your foreign affiliation disclosures, we're doing it from the perspective of what the university needs to report on and remind you to include in your biosketch and other sources of support for your federal awards. However, if your startup is going to go after SBIR, STTR funding, NIH, CDC, FDA, and other agencies are going to be asking you the same types of questions from the perspective of your startup. And so we can't help to navigate your startup STTR applications, but we can tell you that they're going to be asking many of the same types of questions that we are, and we will be reviewing those with you, doing an export control review, and also reminding you what types of things need to be disclosed to your federal agencies. So that's fairly new, and we wanted to just bring it to your attention during this session as well. Thank you. And thanks, Karen. We did make a policies and process slide.
Yeah,
I don't know how many, if you're going to share the slides, but everything is hyperlinked with a few of the state requirements as well as some federal and UMass policies that apply to these situations.
yeah, we will certainly share a PDF of these slides so people will have these links. And I really appreciate your last point about getting in front of some of these issues while people are still on campus that will become concerns as they move forward with a startup. So thank you all for your comments. And we have some additional relevant links in the slide deck, and we're gonna just say thank you, and then we're gonna stop sharing slides and we're gonna move to a panel discussion. Okay, so I get to ask questions, and I've been listening. I've actually been paying attention. So, thank you for getting the spotlight there, Julian. So, so I have some prepared questions, but I also have some other questions. Burnley, I really appreciated you saying, talking about when our researchers should contact the TTO and how it's never too early. Let me ask Heather and Hilary, when should people be thinking about contacting you? Other than, I would say, yes, by no later than incorporation, but how early is too early to contact the Office of Research Compliance?
I can take that one. So it's never too early. I think as soon as you begin thinking along the lines of a startup, even if it it could be a couple of years out. There are a lot of mitigation steps that go into our management plans that might guide your planning in the early phases, such as things like maybe I'd like to use some student time as I get some of the data that's going to support my startup company. Perhaps I need to be thinking about how many hours a week I might want to spend on this activity. We can help by giving some examples of what the mitigation plans typically include.
I think that's great. I just want to remind, I don't know if there's anybody participating for whom this is an issue, but I've talked with a number of PIs who they're incorporating because they want to submit an SBIR proposal in the next 3 months, and that can go really quickly if you wait until the last minute to submit in Kuali. So I'd really urge everybody to get to know Heather and Hilary and get some advice, even since they're willing to do it, even before it's necessary to submit a COI disclosure in Kuali. And Sloan, let me ask you as a founder, what your experience was, if you have any thoughts about from a PI perspective about, when, what makes sense for contacting. You talked about talking to the TTO early.
Mhm.
When did you talk to the Office of Research Compliance? Do you remember?
No, it's been a little while, but I remember feeling kind of relieved because there was a few things I'm like, this feels a little funny, or I'm not sure about this. And so for me, I mean, I try to read about it and do my homework, but it's easier to just put it all out there and, rather than worry about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great to hear. So I think one of the other questions that comes up regularly, Burnley, and Sloan, you mentioned you had this. Burnley, can you talk about when someone comes with IP from a previous institution, or when they have a collaborator at another institution, and how IP works then?
Yeah. So we have a lot of our inventions, maybe a quarter of them are joint with another institution or with a company. If it's with a company, then it's usually through a sponsored research arrangement, and the IP is handled early. It's all laid out how it's going to be handled before the invention is made. With another institution, that's very common, and we work with our counterparts at that institution to get an agreement in place. And that agreement kind of covers how the IP will be handled, who will take the lead on patenting and licensing, and how those expenses will be shared and revenue will be shared. And we usually the inventors will meet and decide what the contributions should be, and we'll usually go with that. So it's very common, and we do it all the time. But IP from another institution, we generally don't handle that. So, the startup would have to reach out to their previous institution to negotiate a license for that if that IP is necessary for the startup.
That's great, but it sounds like people shouldn't feel funny coming to you to talk about those situations, that it's routine for you, even if it doesn't.
It's very routine. Yeah.
That's great. I think another question, and this is one of the reasons I'm really glad Sloan is here, is we think it's really great when graduate students want to be part of a company. We found that, and there's evidence from a lot of different institutions, that it's really a wonderful situation when a graduate student or a postdoctoral fellow who's working on the research gets excited about the potential impact and wants to move forward to lead a startup. We've got several of those examples, including Latde. But I'm wondering if you could each talk a little more, starting with Sloan, about what that process looks like from your point of view as a faculty member or as, for co-inventors or for conflict of interest. So Sloan, could you?
That's a lot of questions. Okay, so I think first of all, it's great on both sides. So for Emily, it gives her, the chance to be a CEO like right out of graduate school and start something and get this amazing experience. For me, there's no way I would have been able to do this on my own. It's a lot of time, and I don't want to dissuade anyone. It's time well spent, but I have a full-time job already, right? Like I I can't take on a second one. So you really need, I think, someone else involved, and even better if it's a graduate student. For us, it wasn't too complicated because she was about to graduate. And so I think that made it a little bit easier. And actually, it wasn't her project that we were trying to base the company on. So it was a little bit smoother sailing for us. I imagine if it's an earlier stage student, it could be more complicated.
So, I guess I'll ask Hilary or Heather to comment on, when do you want to hear? What's important? I'm guessing it's important to navigate the COI as early as possible when there is a student or a postdoctoral fellow in the lab who's involved as well as the faculty member. But can you talk a little bit about why that's important? I know I've heard about cases at other institutions where either someone in the lab is complaining that a graduate student is complaining that they think they should be able to graduate now, but somebody is trying to keep them in the lab working in the lab instead of going on to the startup. But I've also heard the opposite. People saying, no, I was pushed out to do the startup, and the cases in the press seem remarkably similar. You can't really tell what's going on. So how do you think about those cases?
I'd be happy to speak to this question. We definitely want to hear about any potential student involvement when it's still in the idea stage. It's a situation where it's likely that a management plan would be necessary because we want to put protections in place for guarding the student's academic progress. As you mentioned, it shouldn't be too fast or too slow. It needs to be just right. And it can take some time to identify other faculty members who might be able to come into the project to be involved with the student protections. For example, an unconflicted professor who can evaluate the student's coursework, or a co-advisor, or a thesis co-chair. So it takes some time to find good people to bring into the student's team to fulfill those parts of the management plan. So we definitely want to hear about it as early as possible.
And should that come from the faculty member or from the student or both?
Either. We have definitely heard from students first. We've heard from faculty members first. The faculty member does have the obligation to get approval for any student involvement from his or her department chair. So they would definitely want to be disclosing in their quality disclosure so that we can help facilitate that process.
Great. And I guess the other area I'm aware of where students and faculty can come together is as co-inventors, Burnley. And do you get invention disclosures from only faculty, or can you receive them from graduate students? How does that work?
I mean, usually it's a faculty member submitting the invention disclosure and they list their student, but some faculty members want the student to be the lead. So we'll receive the invention disclosure directly from the student and meet with the student. Yeah, either way, it's very common to see postdocs and graduate students on invention disclosures.
Great. I think another question that is sort of a higher pop-up level. is to ask each of you from your own experience, what do you see as motivating people to move toward founding a startup, from researchers to take that step to start a company based on their research or their inventions? And maybe I'll start with Sloan again and ask her what motivated her, other than that she had Emily to help.
I think, as I progress in my career, I like to think about, doing things that are useful. So I very much believe in fundamental research, but for myself personally, I'm finding that I derive more and more satisfaction from things that I think could be tangible or useful in the world. So, yeah.
Heather, let me ask you next.
Sure, Karen. And of course, I'm coming in from a compliance perspective, but just answering, I guess, from my personal experience. I worked for a startup company for 7 years, and I believe that particular company was formed out of a technique that was used for pursuing a different problem or different answer to a different problem, but they found along the way that something else they learned would be extremely useful. And the company was Integrated DNA Technologies, and it became a very, very successful company. Danaher bought them in 2018. I was there in the very early days, but I think sometimes in pursuing one question, you may find other useful aspects and techniques, and it may have been unexpected, but sometimes it's worth pursuing those sidebars.
Thanks. And Hilary, I think one of the hesitations I hear from faculty and graduate student founders is something I'm not conflicted because I don't want to get rich, but so I'm curious from your point of view, what do you hear is motivating and I always say to the founders, don't worry, it's very unlikely you're going to get rich, but you still need to file your conflict of interest. So what is your experience on that?
Mm-hmm. I have mostly been involved in helping with cases where graduate students and faculty have discovered something together. And so I do think it's that real world application that feels very meaningful, and the students' excitement and curiosity. Often they're at the beginning of their careers and really interested in figuring out what mark they can make in the world. And the translational research is very appealing to them.
That makes sense. So Burnley, any thoughts on this? Because you sort of see everybody who's thinking about starting a company, but maybe didn't progress too. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think people have different motivations, but I think everybody wants to make an impact. That's the primary driver for most people.
Okay, I'm gonna do one lightning round question, and then I'm gonna ask Julian to stop the recording, and we will open it up for questions from everybody here. So if there were one thing you could say to everybody here and for the millions of people who will watch this video, what is the one thing you'd like every researcher on campus to know about what you do in terms of helping startups? And or for Sloan, what do they need to, what should they know about from a faculty perspective? What's great about, what's great and what's not so great about startups? And we'll start with you again.
Thanks, Karen. I think what's great is that I've learned a lot about things that I would never have learned about. And also I've really seen my student develop, like I knew she was going to be amazing, but she has even far surpassed what I thought she would do. And so that's been really cool for me to see. And in terms of like advice
Yeah,
would
right.
be, as I said earlier, it's, it's a good amount of time. And so I would highly recommend not doing it on your own, and having, your own Emily to do it with.
Burnley?
Oh, I just want to say that, we're here to be a resource for you if you have any IP questions or needs. And, we love thinking about, your inventions and how to best protect them. So please come talk to us.
Hilary?
I would like to leave everyone with the message to contact us if you have any questions at all, and to please disclose your outside activities and your outside engagements. If we are not aware of them, we can't help you navigate or avoid any of the possible pitfalls.
Heather?
Thanks, Karen. I think I would probably like to leave everyone with a very similar message to what Hilary just said. We want to help. We want to protect you. We want to protect the university. We want to protect your potential startup. And the only way we can do that is if you come to us as soon as possible, and we can get mitigations in place so you can pursue your objectives, and feel confident that you're doing everything properly.
Thanks. I also before we open it up for the audience, I want to just acknowledge that Mike Malone and Karen Moray I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, have been awesome enough to attend today, and I really appreciate that. And thank you for coming, and I hope you'll stay and participate in the Q&A as well. Okay, Julian, I think